They called it a tear in the sky, a wound cut open by something far greater than any ship's engine or warp storm. I remember standing on the edge of the derelict spire, the air trembling around me, watching the stars bend in a way stars should never bend. That was the moment I realized I wasn't in New York anymore. The city noise, the rush of traffic, the heartbeat of millions, and all gone. In its place, a vast silence filled with strange constellations and a cold light that felt like judgment. My name is Peter Parker. At least it used to mean something back on Earth. Here in this galaxy torn between the Emperor's will and the darkness of the warp, it means nothing. I am no Jedi, no soldier of the Astra Militarum, just a man wearing a mask, holding on to the last thread of who he used to be. And yet sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Out here the Force hums like a memory half forgotten, and the warp whispers like an old enemy that knows your name. Between them I stand, and a spider caught in two webs that should never have crossed. And the more I fight, the more I realize every universe has its heroes, and every hero bleeds. If stories like this make you feel something, the clash of worlds, the weight of sacrifice, then stay with me. Subscribe. Share this story with someone who still believes in impossible heroes. Because this one isn't about victory. It's about what happens when hope refuses to die, even in the darkest galaxy imaginable. Chapter 1. The web that tore the starset began with a noise that didn't belong to any world, a hum that crawled beneath my skin, then grew into a roar so deep it seemed to tear through my atoms. I remember falling, though I wasn't sure through what. There was light, then dark, then something else entirely. Colors that didn't exist on any spectrum. Sounds that felt like they were coming from inside my bones. I reached out, trying to shoot a web to grab anything, but the thread just vanished into that kaleidoscope storm. That's when I saw it, a shape in the void, immense and ancient like a cathedral made of dying stars. And a voice that wasn't a voice whispered, "You don't belong here." When I woke, the sky was wrong. No city skyline, no neon hum, no smell of rain on concrete, just iron clouds and the stench of burned metal. I was lying in a crater, my suit flickering, HUD scrambled. Everything hurt. The ground wasn't dirt. It was ash, fused with shattered plasteel and bones. Bones. Hundreds of them. I pushed myself up, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Ruins stretched for miles like a city built only to be destroyed. Towers half melted into slag, pipes bleeding rust, banners fluttering with a strange double-headed eagle. At first, I thought maybe I'd landed on some alien world, but the writing carved into a nearby wall was in a twisted form of Gothic Latin. Gloria, Imperatoris, praise the Emperor. Yeah, definitely. Not queens anymore, my head was pounding. The last thing I remembered before the storm was Dr. Strange shouting something about dimensional instability, and then the portal collapsing. So maybe this was another universe, but this didn't feel like the multiverse trips I'd been on before. This place hated me. The air itself felt alive, like it was watching. Then I heard it, a distant droning. At first I thought it was engines, but as it got closer the sound sharpened into something else. Chanting. Dozens of voices repeating the same phrase over and over in a low, mechanical rhythm. I ducked behind a broken wall, peering out. A procession was moving through the wreckage, figures in tattered robes and rebreathers carrying torches and icons that glowed with cold fire. Behind them came others, soldiers in bulky armor painted gray and black, their helmets featureless except for a faint red glow in the visors. They stopped near what looked like a broken shrine. One of the robed figures began to speak, his voice echoing through a vox grill. I couldn't understand every word, but I caught fragments. Heretic, punished, Emperor's light, purify the flesh. Then I saw what they were dragging. A man, or what was left of one. His skin was scorched, his arms replaced by crude metal limbs. He was pleading, though his words were muffled by some kind of gag. I wanted to intervene. Every instinct screamed at me to stop them. But I hesitated. The last time I jumped in blind, I nearly got vaporized by an alien death ray. I didn't even know the rules here. And these people, they weren't villains in costumes. They looked like zealots from a medieval nightmare armed with laser guns. The leader raised a device and light, searing, holy light, erupted from it. The man on the ground screamed once, then disintegrated into ash. The soldiers didn't flinch. The robed figures bowed, and then in perfect unison they chanted, "The Emperor protects." That's when one of the soldiers turned and his visor locking directly on the wall where I was hiding. My heart stopped. Then a metallic voice barked through the vox. Movement. Left flank. Possible mutant. Great. Mutant. I took one step back and my foot crunched on a bone. That was enough. The soldier raised his weapon and a burst of blue plasma hit the wall inches from my head. Instinct took over. I fired a web and launched myself up into the ruins, landing on a rusted beam 20 feet up. Plasma bolts followed me, scorching the air. I moved fast, swinging between broken towers, ducking, dodging, trying not to think about the fact that every one of those blasts could melt through a tank. They were shouting below. Orders, coordinates. I kept moving until the chanting and gunfire faded behind me. Finally, I landed in what used to be a manufacturing hall, now gutted and silent. My chest was heaving, lungs burning. I looked at my hands. The web shooters were cracked but still working. Barely. Then I heard another sound. A faint mechanical whirring. I turned slowly. In the corner of the hall, half buried under debris, something was watching me. A servitor. Its eyes glowed a dull yellow. Its body was half human, half machine. Face slack, lips moving silently as if reciting an endless prayer. For a second I thought it was harmless. Then its voice rasped to life. Unauthorized bioform detected, reporting to Overseer. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose under the mask. Yeah, sure. Why not? And as alarms began to echo through the ruins, I realized something that chilled me more than any villain I'd ever faced. This world didn't need supervillains. It was one. The alarms didn't sound like anything human. They were layered. Mechanical screams built over distorted hymns, the kind of noise that feels like it's trying to crawl inside your skull. My first thought was to move, get distance, find cover. The servitor's head twitched toward me again, its metal jaw working like it was trying to form words it no longer remembered how to speak. Then with a stuttering burst of static, its voice changed. All praise. The Omnissiah. Flesh is weak. Then it exploded, not in a fiery way, a lot more like every circuit inside it decided to fry at once. The smell was unbearable. Burnt oil and something worse like cooked meat. I stumbled back, coughing into my mask. I didn't know what triggered it, but I wasn't sticking around to find out if there were more of those things nearby. The halls beyond were dark and endless, lit only by the red flicker of broken lumen strips. The air was thick with dust and a faint metallic tang like dried blood. Every step echoed through the vast chamber, and every echo made me wonder what else might be listening. I used my web to climb onto the rafters, safer up high, I figured, and tried to orient myself. Through a shattered ceiling panel, I caught sight of the horizon. The city stretched endlessly, layer after layer of ruins and decay. Smoke poured from colossal chimneys in the distance, where the sky glowed faintly orange, a burning sun trapped behind permanent clouds. And beyond it all, a structure rose like a nightmare given form, a black spire taller than any skyscraper I'd ever seen. its shape jagged and unnatural, like it was designed by someone who'd never seen geometry but hated it anyway. That's when I saw the symbol again. The two-headed eagle, the Aquila. It was carved into every wall, every broken column, every armor plate I'd glimpsed on the soldiers who tried to kill me, and it hit me. I'd read about it once in a universe file Strange had shown me years ago. The Imperium of Man, a galaxy-spanning empire built on faith, fear, and fire, billions living and dying in the name of a corpse god who sat on a golden throne. Yeah, I wasn't just in another dimension. I was in the 41st Millennium, and if even half of what I remembered was true, I was in deep trouble. I moved deeper into the manufactorum, weaving through rusted conveyor lines and skeletal machinery. Somewhere in the distance, a Vox speaker crackled to life, a voice echoing through the metal halls. Attention purification squads. Unauthorized entity detected in Sector 9 Gamma. Possible xeno-infiltration. By decree of the Holy Inquisition, all deviations are to be incinerated on site. Xeno. That was me now. Great. The alien menace. Guess being from another universe qualifies? I pushed on, keeping to the shadows, my mind racing. If this really was the Imperium, then there had to be some kind of city hub, a hive. Maybe I could find someone who wasn't armed with a plasma gun or worshipping a skeleton. Someone who could, I don't know, talk without invoking divine fire. That's when I heard movement ahead. Soft, quick, deliberate. I froze, a shape darted between columns. I tensed, ready to web up whoever it was before they could scream. Then a whisper, "Don't move." The voice was human, tired, urgent, female. I turned slowly. She stepped into view. A woman in a scavenged flak coat, her face smeared with soot, a small las pistol in her hand. She looked more afraid of me than I was of her. "What are you?" she asked. I lifted my hand slowly. "Friendly neighborhood Spiderman?" She blinked. "That doesn't sound like a registered Imperial title." "Yeah, I get that a lot." She hesitated, weapon still trembling. Her eyes flicked over my suit. The lenses, the webbing, the faint glow of my chest emblem. Then she lowered the pistol slightly. "You're not Mechanicus. Not Enforcer. Not Cult. You're something else." Story of my life. She stared for a long moment, then jerked her head. "Come with me before they find you." I followed her through a maze of tunnels, ducking under fallen beams and stepping over skeletal remains. The alarms were fading behind us now, replaced by the rhythmic hiss of leaking pipes. Finally, we emerged into a wide shaft, a kind of industrial underworld filled with smoke, heat, and the sound of distant machinery. She led me to a narrow crawl space behind a broken generator and gestured for me to sit. "They'll sweep this sector soon," she said, catching her breath. "You're lucky I saw you first." "Yeah, thanks. Not exactly how I planned my interdimensional vacation." She frowned. What?" "Never mind. Long story." For a few seconds we just listened to the hum of the machines. Then she spoke again. "Name's Mara. Used to be manufacturing worker. Before the purges. Purges? They come every few weeks now. Someone reports a mutation. A dream. A heretical word. And the Inquisition burns a district. Easier to cleanse 1,000 innocents than miss one heretic." Her voice cracked slightly at that last part. I didn't ask who she'd lost. You could see it in her eyes, so, what's the plan? You've got a resistance or something? She let out a dry laugh. "Resistance? No one resists the Imperium. We just survive." She turned to look at me again. "But you, whatever you are, you shouldn't stay here. The priests say the warp is restless. Mutations, visions, things crawling out of the shadows. They'll think you're one of them." "Yeah," I said quietly. "They already do." Outside, the alarms began again, louder this time, closer. Mara's eyes went wide. "They've found the trail. You need to go now." "Go where?" She handed me something. A small, cracked data slate, its screen flickering with a map of the sector. "There's an access lift in the east wing. Leads down to the underhive. If anyone can hide you, it's them." I nodded. "Thanks." She hesitated, then whispered, "Don't trust anyone who speaks too softly about salvation." "Why?" Her expression darkened. "Because around here salvation wears a mask." As I slipped into the shadows once more, her words echoed in my head. And for the first time since I arrived, I realized this world didn't just destroy the body. It hunted the soul. The air inside the manufacturum tunnels felt alive, thick with whispers that weren't carried by wind. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly beneath layers of rust and grime, as though the metal remembered every scream it had ever absorbed. I pressed my hand against one of those panels and felt warmth beneath it. Not the warmth of machinery, but of something alive. Something watching. I pulled my hand away fast, wiping the sweat and grime onto my sleeve, but the sensation lingered. A faint pulse against my skin, like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. Down here, light was a rare mercy. The few lumen strips that still worked flickered in a nervous rhythm, throwing shifting shadows across the walls. Long, trembling things that seemed to crawl when you weren't looking directly at them. Every sound became a presence. The distant clang of chains, the faint hum of tortured engines, the soft, choked breathing of people trying not to be noticed. We weren't slaves in the usual sense. We were sustenance. Each of us, a thread in the great tapestry that fed the forges above. The overseers called it devotion through labor, but there was no devotion in the screams that bled through the walls at night. The Chaos Priest said our suffering pleased their God. That pain was a form of beauty, and beauty was worship. I used to think those were just words to keep us quiet. Now I wasn't so sure, because sometimes when the machines howled, the air shimmered and just faintly like heat mirage, and I swore I saw faces forming in it. Not human faces, but ones too symmetrical, too perfect, too wrong. They watched the workers toil, smiling as if proud of their creation. And if you stared too long, those faces smiled back. Elena once told me never to meet the eyes of the statues in the upper levels. "They're not statues," she'd whispered, voice trembling. "They see you. And if they remember you, you don't wake up the next day." I laughed then, because laughter was easier than belief. But laughter dies quickly here. My shift had ended hours ago, or maybe days. Time was hard to track when light and dark had no meaning anymore. I moved through the tunnels, past rows of servitors welded into walls, their mouths sealed but their eyes still wet. They twitched sometimes as if dreaming of escape. I couldn't tell if they were once human or if that was just another lie the warp whispered to keep us frightened. Then I heard it. Soft, delicate, almost musical. A hum echoing through the corridor ahead. Not a machine, not quite. A voice. Curiosity was a luxury I couldn't afford, but fear had already become a habit. I followed the sound, careful not to step on the exposed wiring that sparked underfoot. The passage opened into a small chamber, and there she was, one of the white-robed overseers, or what I thought was one. She stood in front of a cracked mirror, tracing her reflection with blood-stained fingers. Her robe shimmered faintly like oil on water. She turned before I could hide. Her face was human mostly, beautiful but in the way a knife's edge is beautiful, too sharp, too precise. Her eyes glowed faintly pink, the color of bruised flesh under starlight. "You shouldn't be down here," she said softly. Her voice was music and threat all at once. "This is where the world forgets you." I swallowed hard. I was just lost? She smiled, stepping closer. "Everyone down here is lost. That's why he loves you. Lost things are the sweetest to reclaim. Her hand reached out, fingers brushing my cheek, and the air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of copper and something sweet. Roses, maybe, or decay pretending to be roses. My mind flickered with memories. My mother's voice, laughter in the rain, a name I hadn't heard in years. For a heartbeat, I wanted to give in, to let her take the weight away. But then I saw what hid beneath her skin. Just for an instant, like a veil lifted, I saw the shifting, endless hunger beneath her beauty. 1,000 whispering mouths, each one begging to be fed. I stumbled back, choking on the air. She laughed, soft and pitying. "You'll learn," she said. "Everyone does. There's no sin in surrender, only in resistance." I turned and ran, the laughter following me like an echo that wouldn't fade. When I finally reached the dormitory, gasping and shaking, the others were already asleep, or pretending to be. I sank into the corner, pressing my forehead to the cold metal, and tried to steady my breathing. But even with my eyes closed, I could still see her, that impossible beauty, that whispering hunger. And I realized then that the greatest danger here wasn't dying. It was forgetting why you wanted to live. The Forge world didn't just break people, it rewrote them slowly, tenderly, until they believed the suffering was beautiful, until they begged for more. I pulled my tattered blanket tighter around me and whispered a prayer, not to the Emperor, not anymore. To anyone, anything that might still hear a child's voice in the dark. "Please," I murmured, "don't let me forget who I am." Outside, the machine screamed back, almost like laughter. Chapter 2, The Feast of Flesh and Fire. When dawn comes here, it doesn't come as light. It comes as heat. It rises from the ground itself. From the furnaces, from the veins of molten metal that pulse beneath the city's skin like arteries feeding a monstrous heart. The air tastes of iron and ash. Every breath feels earned. Every sound carries the dull roar of the forge temples that never sleep. Today was the feast. That's what they called it. Anyway, the celebration of the great work. The overseers said it honored both creation and destruction, that through sacrifice the city remembered its purpose. They said it with smiles that didn't reach their eyes and hands that never stopped trembling. I had only witnessed one feast before. You don't forget it. The banners of violet silk hung from the towers, their edges stained dark by years of smoke. Foxcasters blared hymns in distorted harmony, voices layered so thickly they seemed to claw at one another for dominance. The streets filled with people, workers, nobles, soldiers, and the painted clergy of Slaanesh. The air shimmered with incense that stung the eyes and made the heart beat faster. The scent was maddeningly sweet, like burnt sugar over rot. The great plaza had been transformed overnight. I remember staring at it in disbelief the first time I saw it. The sculpted pillars of bone and brass. The fountains of perfumed water dyed in colors that hurt to look at too long. And at the center, the great stage, built from the shells of tanks and the bodies of statues melted together into something grotesquely elegant. Everything about it screamed beauty and horror side by side, inseparable. They always said that's what the Dark Prince wanted. Perfection through contradiction. Pain so exquisite it felt like pleasure. Pleasure so intense it dissolved into pain. I'd been assigned to work the lower levels of the plaza that day, sweeping debris and guiding pilgrims away from restricted areas. Not that anyone cared about the rules during the feast. The city went mad in unison, laughter, singing, screaming, all bleeding together in one feverish tide. I remember the first cheer that erupted when the priests appeared, draped in shimmering robes, their faces hidden behind golden masks. Each mask bore a different expression. One smiling, one weeping, one blank. The high priest led them. A tall figure whose robe seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly with each step. In his hand he carried a staff made from fused vertebrae, crowned with a living tongue that flicked at the air like a serpent. He raised it and silence rippled across the plaza. Even the engines quieted as if afraid to interrupt. "Behold," he cried, voice echoing unnaturally loud, "the gift of sensation, the harmony of agony and delight. For the Dark Prince does not demand worship, he inspires it." The crowd roared in answer. Some shouted praise, others simply screamed. The noise was beyond human. Then came the offering. A procession of chained figures was led onto the stage. Volunteers, or so they said. Their eyes were covered, their bodies painted in swirling patterns of pink and gold. Some wept, others smiled in dazed ecstasy. A few stood trembling, clearly drugged into submission. The high priest walked among them, whispering blessings that sounded more like curses. And then the music began, not the kind of music one could name. It was part machinery, part heartbeat, part something else. It seemed to vibrate through the bones. The priests moved with it, slow and deliberate, and the crowd followed, bodies swaying in feverish rhythm. What happened next blurred in my mind, even as it burned into it forever. Blades flashed, incense flared, and the air filled with cries that were half agony, half rapture. The offerings were not slain quickly. That would have been mercy. Instead, they were transformed, their bodies reshaped by artifice and warp-born energy into grotesque sculptures of living flesh. Some still moved, mouths open in silent screams. Others seemed to smile even as they burned. The people cheered. Some fell to their knees in worship. Others clawed at their own skin as if to join in the holy suffering. I stood frozen, broom in hand, my stomach twisting as if trying to escape my body. Then I saw him. Ral, my old friend, the one who had dragged me to that cursed club months ago. He was on the stage, one of the chosen. His blindfold had slipped, and for a moment our eyes met. There was recognition there, brief, flickering, human. And then the priest's hand fell upon his head. I don't remember running, but I must have. I found myself in the lower tunnels again, ears ringing with the echo of the crowd's ecstasy. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. When I finally stopped, I realized I was standing beside a wall marked with the sigil of Slaanesh, the coiled symbol glowing faintly like a wound in the metal. It pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat, and I felt it calling, not with words but with sensation, promises of peace, of release, of oblivion sweet as honey, and for a heartbeat I wanted to answer. Then I remembered Ral's face, the flicker of fear beneath the madness. I tore my gaze away and stumbled deeper into the shadows, whispering a prayer I didn't believe in. The feast of flesh and fire was still raging above, and the night was only beginning. The night did not fall on the city that evening. It descended like a shroud, heavy and trembling with unseen motion. Even beneath the manufactorum levels you could feel it. The vibrations of the feast carried through the ground, through the metal walls, through your teeth. The air itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with the chants above. Somewhere far off, a chorus of voices rose and fell, thousands singing in unison, their devotion twisting into something too raw to be called music. I stayed hidden for hours, or maybe minutes. Time blurred here. Every echo, every shudder of machinery, every sigh of the pipes could have been the voice of the gods themselves. When I finally climbed back toward the surface, the streets were glowing. Not with light, not anymore. The violet and gold banners had caught the fire from the pyres, and the smoke above the plaza now shimmered with strange colors, reflecting off the metal towers like auroras trapped in a furnace. The smell hit me first. Burnt oil, charred flesh, and perfume. Always perfume. Even in death they wanted it to smell beautiful. I moved through the crowd slowly, careful not to draw attention. People danced in the streets now, faces streaked with blood and glitter, their eyes wide and glassy. Some wore masks shaped like angels, others like beasts. It was impossible to tell where joy ended and madness began. A woman brushed past me laughing. Her dress was made of living fabric that writhed around her like liquid skin. I caught her gaze for an instant and saw that her pupils were spirals turning endlessly inward. She whispered something, I think it was a blessing, and touched my chest with her hand. The warmth that spread through me was almost pleasant. Almost. But underneath it was a pressure, a whisper in the blood that said, you could be more than this. You could be perfect. I tore myself away and kept moving. The great plaza was unrecognizable now. The sculptures of flesh that had been made during the ritual were moving. Not alive in any human sense, but not still either. They twisted in slow, graceful motions like dancers underwater. The priest stood among them, their golden masks now streaked with crimson. The high priest's voice still carried over the madness, booming with the authority of a god's herald. Do you feel it? He cried. The boundary thins. The veil trembles. Rejoice, for the Dark Prince watches us. And then the veil broke. I cannot describe what it looked like because no human language was made for such things. One moment the air was filled with smoke and music. The next it rippled, as if the world itself were just a reflection on the surface of a lake. Colors bled into each other. The shadows deepened until they became shapes. The ground itself began to hum. From the heart of the plaza where the offerings had been placed, something rose. Not a creature, not yet. Just movement, and silk-like and sinuous like smoke made solid. It danced through the air, and wherever it touched, reality bent. Statues melted into flesh, people into song, sound into color, and in that chaos, laughter, not cruel but beautiful. Too beautiful. Someone beside me fell to their knees, weeping with joy. Another began tearing at their own clothes, screaming the name of Slanesh. The priests didn't try to stop it. They joined in, their voices lifting in rapture. I should have run. Every instinct screamed it. But my body felt heavy, pinned by the sheer awe of what I was seeing. The smoke formed shapes now, hands, faces, wings, reaching out from the thin place between worlds. The veil was tearing open wider, and then I saw her. At first I thought it was another priestess, tall, robed, perfect. But perfection shouldn't hurt to look at. Every curve, every line of her form shimmered like glass on fire. Her eyes were twin stars, her smile the edge of a blade. The crowd erupted into ecstatic wailing at her appearance, and I understood. This wasn't a woman. This was a servant. A demonette of the Dark Prince. She walked as if the ground itself desired to be beneath her feet. Every step left behind the faint scent of roses and blood. Her gaze swept over the crowd, and those she looked upon collapsed in fits of trembling pleasure or terror. I couldn't tell which. Her eyes found me. I felt it before I even realized I was breathing her name. My thoughts melted into sensation. The sound of my own heartbeat became music. The air tasted of honey and ash. My fear was still there, but it was distant, dulled beneath the weight of beauty that was wrong. She spoke, and her voice wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, like every memory of desire and pain I'd ever known woven together into one perfect whisper. You remember the old ways, she said. You remember silence, restraint, duty. Why do you still cling to chains when you could sing? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My throat felt full of light. Behind her, the portal widened and more shapes began to move through. The world itself screamed, a deep harmonic groan that shook the towers and shattered glass. I stumbled backward, eyes burning, heart racing, the air itself vibrating with impossible color. And in that moment I realized something terrible. The feast wasn't a ritual of worship. It was a signal flare, a beacon to the warp, and the gods had finally answered. The veil did not shatter with a sound. It unfolded, like silk catching in a wind that wasn't there. One moment the plaza was burning, the next it was melting. Light and sound twisted together until I could no longer tell where the world ended and the warp began. The stone beneath my feet rippled like water, and the sky, Emperor help me. The sky was singing. I could see everything. Every heartbeat, every flicker of fear in the eyes of those who still clung to sanity. Their souls glowed like candles in a storm, and unseen hands reached for them through the thinning air. Some were taken instantly, bodies collapsing into pale husks, their essence devoured by unseen mouths. Others changed. Their flesh shimmered, their bones lengthened, and their screams became laughter as they shed their human shapes like discarded veils. I ran. I didn't know where. Only that I had to move. The laughter followed, echoing through the streets like a melody half remembered. The scent of perfume and burning oil was everywhere. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw the first of the demons fully cross into our world. They were beautiful, every one of them, the kind of beauty that should never exist. Their bodies were made of contradictions, sharp and soft, elegant and monstrous, a living reflection of desire itself. One moved like a dancer, each step slicing the air. Another crawled, a serpentine mass of limbs and tongues whispering 1,000 promises. And at their center, the tall figure I had seen before, the demonette with eyes like twin suns. She watched me move through the chaos, and I felt her amusement in the air, like a hand brushing the back of my neck. "You run," she said softly, though she was still across the plaza. "But where can you go, little soul, when the song is inside you?" The world shifted again. The street I turned onto no longer led where it should. Buildings were bending, breathing, their walls pulsing with veins of living light. I stumbled through an archway that opened into something that might have once been a chapel. Now it was a mirror maze of flesh and glass. Faces appeared in the reflections. Mine, twisted and multiplied, each one whispering a different name. In the distance, I could still hear the priesthood chanting, though their words were no longer human. The syllables had turned into soundless colors that filled the air like heat. I caught sight of one of the priests crawling toward the altar, his mask cracked, his skin shimmering like liquid gold. He reached for me, his hand trembling. "She comes," he gasped. "The Dark Prince walks among us." Then his body erupted into a spray of light and sound, dissolving into a chorus of screams that lingered like incense. The ground beneath the altar tore open, and something vast began to rise, a tower of shifting forms, a storm-made flesh. Within its folds I glimpsed faces, billions of them, lovers, murderers, dreamers, all crying out in ecstasy and agony. This was not just a demon. This was a presence, the very will of Slaanesh, bleeding through reality, wearing the skin of pleasure and pain. The air pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. Every nerve burned, every heartbeat a thunderclap. The song filled my head, my lungs, my soul. It whispered my name now, over and over, twisting it until it became something new. I fell to my knees. I didn't want to look, but my eyes would not obey. And then I saw what lay at the center of it all. A throne made of sound and color, surrounded by figures locked in eternal embrace. Above it floated a single jewel of light, pulsing with rhythm, casting waves of unbearable beauty through the ruin. It wasn't a heart. It wasn't anything physical. It was want, pure and endless. In that instant I understood the truth of Slaanesh's dominion. It was not about pleasure or pain. It was about need. The hunger to be more, to feel more, to become something greater than flesh, and the curse of never being satisfied. I crawled backward, my hands slick with blood that wasn't mine. The demonette appeared before me once more, moving like smoke through light. Her claws traced the edge of my jaw, gentle as a lover's touch. "Do you see now?" she whispered. "There is no escape from perfection. Even fear is beautiful when it belongs to us. For a heartbeat, I almost believed her. The pain was gone. The fear had become warmth. The song was all that existed. Then a sound cut through it. A sound that did not belong. A low mechanical hum. Cold. Focused. Human. Through the haze I saw them. A squad of black-armored figures, purity seals fluttering, chains words roaring. The mark of the Aquila glinted faintly on their pauldrons. The Emperor's faithful. Bolter fire tore through the haze, exploding demon flesh in bursts of violet flame. The spell broke and reality screamed. The demonette hissed, her beauty turning feral as the air filled with the stench of ozone and burning ichor. The leader of the squad, a sergeant I think, grabbed me by the collar, hauling me to my feet. "Move, citizen," he barked. "You're in a warp breach zone." Behind him the demonette laughed, the sound slicing through the roar of battle like silk through steel. "Run if you wish," she purred, but the song remembers its own. I didn't look back. The last thing I saw before the light consumed the plaza was her face. Half smile, half promise. And in her eyes, I swore I saw something familiar. Pity. Then the world burned white. Chapter 3. The Aftermath of Ecstasy. When I awoke, there was no sky. Only ash. The light of dawn never came to this world again. The clouds hung low, swollen with poison and silence. I remember lying there, half buried in the ruin of a chapel that no longer resembled stone. The air tasting like burnt metal and perfume. My lungs ached with every breath. The war had ended, but the whispers hadn't. The plaza was gone. The manufactorum, the markets, the spires, all swallowed by a shimmering haze that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The ground itself felt alive, humming softly under my palms as if remembering the pleasure of being devoured. Around me lay the broken remnants of the faithful and the damned, their faces frozen in expressions that defied reason, some in ecstasy, others in horror. It was impossible to tell which were blessed and which were cursed. The Space Marines who had come to save us, they were gone too. Only fragments of armor remained, cracked pauldrons bearing the faded sigils of the Emperor. I remember picking up one of their purity seals, the parchment blackened but still intact. The words were smeared, but one phrase remained. "Suffer not temptation to speak." I whispered it to myself like a prayer, though I no longer knew who I was praying to. Every sound in the distance seemed wrong. The wind moved like a voice, and sometimes it was a voice. My name drifted through it, stretched and reshaped until it no longer belonged to me. I thought it was just my mind fracturing, until I saw the others. Survivors. Or something close to it. They wandered through the ruins with eyes that didn't blink, their skin faintly luminous beneath the soot. One woman was humming, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air as if she could still feel the song that had once filled it. A child sat beside a corpse and braided its hair with threads of gold pulled from her own veins. None of them looked afraid. None of them seemed human anymore. I tried to speak to them, but my voice felt heavy, muffled as if the air itself rejected sound. When I finally managed a word, they all turned toward me at once. Their movements were too smooth, too deliberate. The child smiled, a soft, innocent smile that chilled me more than the wind. "You came back," she said. I froze. "From where?" She tilted her head, her eyes gleaming faintly violet. "From the dream." Behind her the sky rippled. For a moment I saw what she meant. Not with my eyes, but with something deeper. A memory not my own. A city that existed within the warp itself, carved from music and desire. Its towers made of living glass and flame. It was still there, watching, waiting. I stumbled backward, breaking the illusion. The others resumed their silent wandering as if I no longer existed. Whatever they were now, they were bound to something beyond this world. Maybe they were still hearing the song. Maybe they never stopped. Days, or what passed for them, blurred together. The Imperial recovery forces never came. The Vox systems were dead. The air unbreathable beyond the ruins. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes moving through the haze, too graceful to be human, too terrible to be divine. I began to write, not to remember but to anchor myself. Words were the only thing that still obeyed me. Then one night I heard it again. A faint hum beneath the silence. A rhythm. Slow. Deliberate. Beautiful. It came from the cathedral that once stood at the city's heart, the same place where the veil first tore. Against every instinct I followed the sound. The path was lined with broken statues of saints, their faces melted into featureless masks. At the entrance I found a trail of shimmering dust, footprints glowing faintly pink leading inward. The air inside was thick with incense and decay. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing in time with the hum. The altar had changed again. No longer an idol of stone or gold, but a shape half-formed, sculpted by unseen hands from the remnants of the dead. It wasn't monstrous. It was beautiful, terribly, heartbreakingly beautiful, and standing before it was the demonette. She looked unchanged, ageless, radiant, her claws folded behind her back like a queen at prayer. When she turned toward me, I realized something impossible. She was crying, her tears glowed like starlight as they fell onto the altar. Where they touched, the flesh shimmered and solidified like a sculpture taking form. A human figure, fragile, serene, rose from the mass, shaped by her sorrow. I realized then what she was making. A human. She looked at me through the glow. "You see now why we come," she said softly. "Not for hunger, not for hate, but for creation, for beauty the mortal world could never allow." I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But something in her voice rooted me in place. She gestured toward the statue, and for a heartbeat I saw myself in its shape. Not as I was, but as I could have been. Flawless, eternal. Her hand reached out toward me. "Join me," she whispered. "You've already heard the song." For a moment I almost did. But then I remembered the priest's last words. "She comes." And I understood what he meant. Slaanesh doesn't offer paradise. Slaanesh offers reflection. A mirror that shows what you crave most, then consumes you for daring to desire it. I turned and fled into the ash. Behind me her voice followed. Not angry, not mournful, but almost tender. "Run if you wish, little soul. The dream will wait. It always does." Outside, the sky cracked open once more, not with light but with silence. The song faded, but it left something inside me. A spark, a hunger. And I realized with a horror too deep to name that the demon hadn't lied. The song was inside me now. The song didn't fade. It just learned to whisper. At first I thought it was gone, a fever dream swallowed by exhaustion. But even as I wandered the ruins, even as I scavenged for food among the collapsed towers and shattered shrines, I could hear it, faint, delicate like a melody remembered from childhood. Sometimes it hummed through the rusted pipes or in the wind that slipped between the broken walls. Sometimes it was in my own breath. Days blurred, each one bleeding into the next. Hunger gnawed, but the hunger inside was worse. I began to crave strange things, not food, not warmth, but sensation. The chill of metal, the sting of salt, the way the air trembled when I whispered my own name. Every touch felt amplified, every color too bright, every sound too sharp. It wasn't just me. The other survivors, those wandering husks that roamed the city, began to change. Not suddenly, but gradually, like candles melting in slow motion. I saw one man standing motionless in the square for hours, his hands cupped as if holding something invisible. When I crept closer, I saw that his palms were bleeding, from carving perfect circles into his skin. He didn't even flinch. Another woman painted the remnants of her hab wall with her own blood and ash, humming a hymn I didn't recognize. The words were nonsense, but the melody was familiar. I realized then that the song was spreading. It wasn't something you heard. It was something you became. One night, I followed the hum to what used to be the manufactorum quarter. The air there was dense, shimmering with faint motes of light that drifted like spores. Machines still groaned somewhere deep within the ruins, working without masters. I found a group of people gathered around a broken assembly line, their bodies moving in eerie rhythm as if continuing their old tasks. Their faces were peaceful, serene, yet when I looked closer I saw the metal had fused into their flesh. Cables ran from their spines into the conveyor belts, feeding on something unseen. They were still alive. Their eyes turned toward me in perfect unison. No malice, no fear, just acceptance. One of them smiled faintly and said, "We are useful again." I ran. I didn't stop until my lungs burned. When I finally collapsed, I realized I'd crossed into the lower tunnels, the places once used for transport and storage. Down here the air was cooler, the noise muffled. For a while I thought I was safe. Then I saw the light, soft pink like dawn filtered through blood. It came from deeper in the tunnels. Against every instinct I followed it. Because that's what this place does. It draws you closer to the things you fear, and maybe I wanted to see it again. That beauty, that horror, that meaning the demon had shown me. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber that hadn't existed before. I swear it hadn't. The walls pulsed faintly, organic and wet, their surface studded with fragments of mirrors. The light came from them, from the reflections themselves. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all showing distorted versions of me. In one reflection, I was kneeling before an altar. In another, I was laughing as my flesh turned to glass. In another, I was radiant. Perfect. I smashed one of the mirrors with my bare hand. It didn't shatter. It bled. That's when I heard the voice again, and softer now, more familiar. Not the demon's, my own. "Why do you still run?" it asked. "Don't you see? You've already chosen." I stumbled backward, pressing against the trembling wall. My reflection followed, but it didn't move when I did. It smiled. A thin crack ran through the glass, and from it seeped something warm, shimmering and alive. It crawled along the surface, reaching toward me like liquid light. I turned and fled once more, but even as I ran, I could feel it behind me. Not chasing, just watching. Waiting. When I finally reached the surface, the city was glowing again. Not burning, glowing. The clouds above pulsed faintly, reflecting the colors of the warp. The air was filled with faint laughter, the kind that trembles just at the edge of sanity. That's when I saw Raoul. He was standing on a high ledge overlooking the ruins, his face serene, his clothes in tatters. He looked like a statue carved from marble and gold, every muscle defined, his eyes shining with impossible light. For a moment I thought he was alive. Then he turned toward me and I saw his smile. It wasn't human. It wasn't even malicious. It was content. "I understand now," he said, his voice distant and hollow. "We fought against the inevitable. But look." He gestured toward the city, his hand trembling with ecstasy. "Isn't it beautiful?" The ground beneath him shimmered, not with light but with motion. The stone itself rippled like water. Before I could speak, before I could even move, the ledge dissolved and Raoul sank into the earth like a man falling into a mirror. The laughter grew louder. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat among the ruins, staring at my hands, half expecting them to change. They didn't, not yet. but I could feel something moving beneath the skin, something slow and patient. Slanesh's domain wasn't just a place. It was an infection, a dream that didn't end when you woke, and I was already dreaming. I don't remember when the city stopped being a city. Maybe it was gradual, too subtle to notice at first, like how rot begins beneath the surface of a fruit. Maybe it happened all at once, in some cosmic instant I simply failed to perceive. What I do know is that one morning, when I stepped outside my hab and looked across the skyline, the towers weren't made of steel anymore. They breathed. Each spire undulated like a living thing, shimmering with the same iridescent hues that haunted my dreams. What had once been soot-stained concrete now pulsed with a soft luminescence, veins of light running up their sides like arteries. It wasn't beautiful, not really. It was horrifying. And yet in the corner of my mind something whispered that it was right. That this was how the world was always meant to look. I tried to focus on survival. It was the only thing that still made sense. I scavenged what little food remained untouched by corruption, bartered with the quiet ones and those like me who hadn't yet given in, and avoided the music that rose from the plazas at night. But even that became impossible, because the city itself began to sing. The hum came from everywhere, from the stones beneath my feet, from the air itself, from the pulse inside my veins. It wasn't noise anymore. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, and it was syncing with mine. That was when I met her. She appeared one evening when the skies turned violet and gold, walking through the haze like a ghost of the old world. Her armor shimmered faintly, covered in runes that shifted when I looked at them too long. A mask hid her face, and smooth, featureless, reflecting my own expression back at me. She carried no weapon, but the air around her rippled like heat over metal. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Her voice wasn't cruel. It was gentle, almost sorrowful. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I had seen enough of demons to know that beauty was their sharpest weapon. "Are you one of them?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "Does it matter?" The wind carried a faint scent, like perfume and ozone. My stomach turned, but my mind felt light, unfocused. She stepped closer, her feet not quite touching the ground. "This place was built on the bones of denial," she murmured, running a gloved hand across a wall that quivered under her touch. "For millennia your kind worshipped a corpse. You caged your desires, called them sin, and prayed for purity that never existed. Now the lie has ended. The song you hear is the truth of what you are." "I'm not like them," I managed to whisper. Her mask turned toward me, and I swear I felt her smile behind it. No one ever is until they are. Something inside me broke at that. Not a physical thing, but a certainty. I'd always believed that willpower could save me. That if I just clung to my disgust, my fear, my faith in the Emperor, I could stay clean. But standing there before her with the city glowing like a living jewel, I realized the truth. Faith was just another form of hunger. We prayed for purpose, for connection, for light. Slanesh simply offered it without shame. She extended her hand toward me. I saw the faint shimmer of movement beneath her skin, like liquid mercury flowing in her veins. "Touch the world as it is," she said. "Not as they told you it should be." For one terrible moment I wanted to. I wanted to feel it. The warmth, the unity, the promise that I wasn't just a meaningless spark in an endless dying galaxy. My fingers trembled. Then a scream shattered the trance. From a nearby alley a figure burst into view. A man covered in ritual paint, his body warped by the touch of the warp. He lunged toward her, shrieking praise to Slanesh, blade raised high. But before he reached her, he stopped mid-stride. Completely still. His skin rippled. His body folded inward, bones cracking in silence until he was gone. Nothing but a smear of light on the cobblestones. The woman turned back to me. "Even beauty has boundaries," she whispered. "And those who mistake ecstasy for understanding will always be consumed." She vanished into the haze, leaving only the faint trace of her scent, a ghost of sweetness that lingered long after she was gone. That night, the city wept. Rain fell, or something like it, droplets that shimmered as they touched the ground. I stood in it for hours, letting it wash over me. When I looked at my reflection in the puddles, I saw my own face staring back. But behind my eyes something shimmered. Something awake. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that I was still human. But when I closed my eyes, I saw her hand again, that graceful, trembling hand, reaching out through the dark. And for the first time, I didn't know if I would pull away. Chapter 4. The Silent Carnival. The city no longer slept. It dreamed. And I dreamed with it. Days and nights had blurred into one unending performance, a carnival without laughter, without pause, where every soul became both audience and actor in a theater of desire. The air itself shimmered with color and sound, too rich to describe, too wrong to be real. The sky pulsed like the surface of a living eye, and the ground beneath my boots trembled with whispers that seemed to come from beneath the skin of the world. I wandered through streets that had once been familiar. The markets were still there, but the vendors didn't sell food anymore. They sold experiences, bottled sensations, captured moments of pleasure, fragments of emotion harvested from the willing and the damned. A woman with half a face of glass smiled at me as I passed, holding out a vial that glowed faintly with a heartbeat inside it. "Just one drop," she whispered, her voice echoing with 3 overlapping tones. "One drop, and you'll feel everything you've ever lost." I kept walking. Not because I wasn't tempted, and I was, but because something deep within me still remembered what silence felt like. And in this place, silence was forbidden. Every breath, every thought, every heartbeat was part of the music that kept the carnival alive. The Plaza of Echoes was the heart of it all. Once it had been the Civic Center, a monument to imperial discipline, marked with the Aquila and the Emperor's words of unity. Now those words had melted into strange sigils that shimmered like oil under light, changing shape when you looked away. 1,000 dancers moved through the square, each one lost in their own rapture, their movements perfectly synchronized yet entirely chaotic. At the center stood a stage carved from flesh and crystal, and upon it, the conductor. He was tall, impossibly so, draped in robes of sound that rippled with every note that left his lips. His face was hidden by a mask of mirrored steel, reflecting the faces of those who looked upon him, distorting them into parodies of joy. In one hand, he held a baton made from the spine of something that might once have been human. With every movement, the air bent around him and the crowd trembled in unison, their bodies shifting to match his rhythm. I should have run. I should have closed my eyes, prayed, screamed, anything. But I couldn't, because his song wasn't made of sound. It was made of memory. Every note struck something deep inside me. A forgotten feeling, a buried desire, a moment I thought I'd lost forever. My childhood laughter, my mother's voice, the taste of real bread, the warmth of another hand holding mine in the dark. They all returned, blindingly vivid, crashing into me like waves of light. And beneath it all, a voice whispered, "This is what the Emperor took from you." I fell to my knees. The song grew louder, richer, crueler. The dancers around me convulsed in ecstasy, their bodies bending in ways that should have broken bone but instead produced light. I watched as one man, an old priest, his robes still, marked with the imperial sigil, tore the aquila from his chest and screamed as it melted into gold in his hands. The conductor turned toward me. His mirrored mask caught the light, and for an instant I saw myself reflected. Not as I was, but as I could be. Perfect, beautiful, unafraid. "Sing," he said. His voice wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for a heartbeat I wanted to obey. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. No song, no scream, only silence. And the music stopped. The dancers froze. The lights dimmed. The conductor's mask turned toward me, tilting slightly, like a curious predator studying its prey. "Ah," he murmured, a discordant note. He stepped down from the stage, his robes dragging across the ground, leaving trails of sound behind. The crowd parted as he approached. My hands trembled. I couldn't move. The silence around me grew thicker, pressing against my skull, suffocating. He knelt before me, his mask inches from my face. I could see my reflection trembling in its mirrored surface. "You still believe in silence," he whispered. "You still believe there's a place where the music cannot reach." His gloved hand touched my forehead. And suddenly I saw the truth of the carnival. The city wasn't performing for Slaanesh. It was Slaanesh. Every dancer, every note, every color, all of it was the god's laughter, expressed through mortal form. This was no act of rebellion, no celebration of freedom. It was consumption disguised as joy. Every scream was an instrument. Every soul was a string. Every heartbeat was another note in the god's eternal symphony. I tore myself away from him and ran, through streets that twisted and shifted underfoot, through crowds that wept and sang, through corridors made of breathing walls that whispered my name. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the city, where the music was faint and the air tasted of dust instead of perfume. For the first time in weeks, I heard nothing. But even in the silence, my heart still beat to the rhythm of the song. And I knew then that silence wasn't freedom. It was the echo left behind after pleasure devoured everything else. I woke to the smell of glass dust and ash. The city stretched before me, shimmering in a haze of violet light, its towers bending like melted candles. Every surface pulsed faintly, alive with memory and sound as though the stone itself were breathing. I thought I had escaped the conductor's reach. I was wrong. The music still echoed somewhere inside me. Not as a melody anymore, but as a pulse, quiet and constant like a parasite that had learned the rhythm of my heart. I found shelter in what looked like an abandoned shrine. Its pillars were cracked, and the golden reliefs of saints had been eaten away by time or something worse. The altar was draped with silk that moved even when there was no wind. On it lay bones, human I thought, carved into flutes and harps, instruments made from faith, instruments that sang without touch. As I entered, I heard faint weeping. At first I thought it was the wind again, playing tricks on my mind. But then I saw her. A woman knelt by the altar, her back to me. Her hair was white, her robes torn and faded. She was muttering a prayer in a language I didn't recognize. Something old. Something before the Imperium's time. Around her, hundreds of small candles burned, their flames shaped like tongues, flickering in rhythm with her voice. When she turned, I saw that she wasn't weeping for herself. Her eyes were gone, replaced by two smooth stones, and from the empty sockets, faint light glowed, like starlight trapped in glass. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "The carnival doesn't forgive silence." Her voice wasn't accusing. It was weary, like she had said those words too many times before. I told her I had escaped the music, that I wanted to understand it, that I wanted to know why. The woman smiled, though it was not a smile of joy. "There is no why in the domain of Slaanesh, only the echo of what once was. Every pleasure, every song, every color you saw, they were stolen pieces of what the universe used to be. The god of excess does not create. It remembers, and in remembering, it consumes." She rose slowly and gestured for me to follow. Behind the shrine was a spiral staircase descending into the earth. The air grew colder with every step. I could hear faint murmurs below, not words, but the low hum of voices locked in endless prayer. At the bottom, we reached a chamber lit by liquid light dripping from the ceiling like tears. In the center stood a massive organ carved from crystal and bone, its pipes winding into the walls into the city above. And seated at its base, motionless, were hundreds of figures, robed, kneeling, their mouths sewn shut with gold thread. "These," she whispered, "are the ones who refused to dance, the ones who would not sing." My stomach turned. Their chests still rose and fell. They were alive, and from somewhere deep within their throats, faint vibrations trembled. The sound of muffled agony blending into harmony. "The conductor uses them to power the carnival," she continued. "Their silence feeds the song. Their restraint becomes the rhythm. Every note above, every dancer's movement, every pleasure experienced, all of it is built upon the suffering of those who could not yield." I stepped closer. Their faces were peaceful, almost serene. It was worse than horror. It was acceptance. "Why don't you destroy it?" I asked. My voice echoed too loudly in the stillness. Her smile faded. "Destroy it? This is all that remains of what we were. Once this was a hive of industry, a world of devotion. When the warp came, our people begged for salvation." Slaanesh answered, "Not with chains, but with beauty. And beauty is the cruelest prison of all." She pressed a hand against the nearest figure's shoulder. "They call me the archivist now. I remember what came before so that someone somewhere might understand what we lost. Not to save it, it cannot be saved, but to witness it, to keep truth alive, even when it is drowning in delight." I didn't know what to say. My mind was filled with the faces of the dancers, the shimmering towers, the endless laughter. All of it built upon this chamber of silence. And then I realized something else. The faint hum beneath my skin, the echo of the conductor's song, had grown louder the longer I stayed. The woman tilted her head slightly as if hearing the same rhythm. "He knows you're here," she said. I turned toward the stairwell. The air shimmered. A single, distant note rang through the stone, soft, pure, and utterly final. The candles blew out all at once. The woman didn't move. She only said, "You can still choose. Join the silence or join the song." And then I was alone. The hum inside me had become unbearable, vibrating through bone and blood. I could feel the music clawing its way back, not from the air this time, but from within. I ran. The staircase seemed longer now, twisted, breathing. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. Every wall whispered promises. By the time I reached the surface, the sky had changed again. The carnival was in full bloom. Its lights brighter, its laughter louder, its beauty sharper than ever before. I knew then that silence would never save me. The song was inside me now, and every moment of resistance only made it stronger. Still, I couldn't stop. I turned toward the outer gates, where the lights faded into shadow, and whispered a prayer, not to the Emperor, not to Slaanesh, but to whatever force still allowed me to run, because I had to find out what lay beyond the carnival, what was left of the world it had devoured. I remember the first time I saw the edge of the carnival, not as a line, but as a breath held too long. The lights thinned there, fading into a twilight that never fully turned to night. The laughter behind me grew faint, warped by distance until it became something else. Something like wind whistling through bone. The road that led outward was paved with glass. Beneath it I could see shapes moving slowly as though trapped just beneath the surface. Faces, arms, fragments of song frozen mid-melody. They shifted when I walked, like the reflections were following me, watching, whispering. I kept walking until the sounds of joy became whispers of hunger. The sky pulsed in long, slow waves of color, violet into blue, blue into crimson, crimson into a pale gold that hurt my eyes. Everything here moved like it was breathing, alive yet empty. Then I saw them, the escapees. They gathered where the light met the shadow, half visible in the mist. Some knelt, trembling, their bodies half dissolved into color. Others lay still, fused into the crystal ground as if the carnival refused to let them go. I had expected horror. What I found instead was despair. Slow, quiet, patient despair. A man in tattered robes turned to me. His skin was stretched thin, almost transparent, and beneath it, faint light pulsed like veins made of starlight. "You shouldn't have come," he said. His voice cracked, dry but not cruel. "You carry the song with you. It will not let you leave." I asked him if anyone had ever made it past the edge, truly escaped. He only smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't belong to hope. "We thought we could," he whispered. "We thought silence would save us. But silence is just another note in his symphony." He gestured toward the horizon. "Go look for yourself." I followed his gaze. There was no horizon, only a vast plain of mirrors stretching endlessly, each one reflecting not the sky but the carnival itself, infinite, recursive, looping back upon itself in perfect symmetry. It hit me then. This wasn't a world. It was a reflection, an echo that could never end. Every step away was just another step deeper inside. I stumbled forward anyway, unwilling to accept it. The air grew colder. The glass beneath my boots began to hum. My reflection looked back at me, only it wasn't me anymore. Its smile lingered too long. Its eyes glowed faintly violet. The hum grew into a low rhythmic pulse. The reflections began to move even when I stood still. They whispered words I couldn't understand, syllables that sounded like my name spoken backwards. I pressed my hands against my ears. But the sound came from within, from the echo the conductor had left in my blood. Then the ground cracked. A shard of glass broke open beneath my feet, revealing a void filled with light. Not white, not gold, and something beyond both, like color and sound fused together. I felt it pulling me down. That's when the woman's voice returned, the archivist's, faint and far away, as though carried by the hum itself. "You can't run from what you've heard," she said. "But you can remember what it cost you." Her voice steadied me. I dug my hands into the edges of the glass, forcing myself back. My reflection laughed as I did, a perfect mirror mocking the struggle. But I didn't stop. I crawled forward until the light dimmed, until the hum weakened. When I looked up again, I realized I had crossed the edge. The carnival was behind me. Before me stretched a desert of colorless sand. No sound, no light, no song, silence. It was unbearable. I hadn't realized until that moment how much the sound had become a part of me. Without it, the world felt hollow, empty, unreal. The silence pressed down like a weight, suffocating, endless. Then, from that silence, came a whisper. Soft, gentle, familiar. "Come back," it said. "You were beautiful when you danced." The voice was mine. The sound came from behind, from the reflection still trapped in the glass. It smiled again, slow and patient, as though it knew how this would end. And maybe it did. Because the truth was, I wanted to go back. Not to serve the conductor, not to lose myself to the song. But because, for all its madness, the carnival made me feel. Here, beyond its edge, there was nothing. No pain, no joy, no sound, no self. So I sat there, between silence and symphony, between freedom and oblivion, unable to decide which was worse. And somewhere, faint and distant, the music began again, slow at first, then rising, until even the desert began to hum with its echo. The carnival was calling, and I knew deep down that no one ever truly left. Chapter 5. The Throne of Echoes. It began with silence. True silence. Not the quiet that comes between heartbeats, but the kind that erases them. The kind that devours thought before it's born. When I opened my eyes, the world had become still, as though reality itself was holding its breath. The desert stretched before me in endless gray. The glass road behind had vanished, swallowed by the void. My footprints were gone too, erased as if I had never walked at all. The only thing that remained was the faint vibration in my bones, a low, distant hum that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. It wasn't the carnival anymore. This was something deeper, older, the place beneath all sound, the realm where Slanesh listened. They call it many names in forbidden texts. The Throne of Echoes, the still chamber, the place between notes, but here, in the flesh of experience, it was none of those things. It was simply awareness, endless and watching. At first I thought I was alone. Then the whispers returned, not as voices this time, but as memory. Each one a ghost of someone I'd met. Ral's laughter, the archivist's measured tone, the faceless dancer's song. They circled me like a slow orbit of forgotten lives. "Why did you run?" one voice asked. "Why do you still pretend you're free?" Another followed. Each question sank into me like a needle of sound. I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because every answer I could give was just another note in their melody. The ground beneath me shimmered, not with color this time, but with reflection. A mirror surface rippled outward, revealing something beneath the desert's skin. A throne. It wasn't made of stone or metal or gold. It was made of sound given form. The surface bent and pulsed like liquid glass, vibrating faintly with unseen music. Every whisper, every breath of wind, every memory fed into it, reshaping its form. And on it sat no figure. Only absence. Yet I felt the presence, vast and terrible, patient and indulgent. Like a smile carved into eternity. I fell to my knees before it, not out of reverence, but because standing felt impossible. Every nerve in my body sang. My bones vibrated with resonance. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was too precise to be agony, too overwhelming to be pleasure. It was everything and it was nothing. Then the silence spoke. Not in words, but in the way the air trembled, in the shiver that crawled down my spine. "You came here searching for peace," it said, though no sound escaped. "You came here fleeing my song, but even in silence you heard me." I tried to speak, but my voice broke. "What are you?" The silence shifted and the throne pulsed once, slow and deep. "I am what was left when the first scream found beauty in its own echo." The words weren't meant for understanding, yet they settled inside me, cold and clear. I saw flashes, not visions, but sensations, of countless souls kneeling here, each one believing they had escaped the carnival, each one consumed not by noise, but by the unbearable quiet that followed it. You mistake silence for salvation, the voice continued. But silence is only my breath drawn in. Something cracked inside me then. Not my body, my certainty, because in that moment I realized this place wasn't a prison. It was a reflection of desire itself. Every mortal who had fled here came chasing purity, peace, escape, and in doing so offered up the most exquisite sound of all, the sound of surrender. The throne stirred. The air rippled, and then I saw her, not a demon, not a god, but the shape of every desire I'd ever buried, standing before me with my mother's eyes, my lover's smile, and my own voice. She reached out her hand, not commanding, but gentle. "You don't have to fight anymore," she said softly. "You've suffered enough. Stay here, be still, I wanted to. Emperor, forgive me, I wanted to." Because her hand promised warmth. Her voice promised quiet. Her eyes promised understanding. After all the madness, all the screaming colors and endless temptations, this was peace. The peace of surrender. But beneath that peace I heard it again. The faintest echo of laughter, sweet and cruel. I looked at her hand, and I saw it tremble. Not from compassion, but from hunger. Her skin shimmered faintly with shifting colors. Her eyes brightened with the same violet fire I'd seen in the carnival's heart. The illusion flickered for just a heartbeat, and in that flicker I saw the truth. There was no silence here, only the quiet between screams. I pulled my hand back, slowly. Her expression didn't change, but the air around her began to tremble. "You still resist," she whispered. "Why?" "Because I remember," I said. My voice came out hoarse, raw, barely more than a breath. "And memory isn't yours to take." Her smile widened, too wide, the illusion fracturing into ribbons of sound. "Then remember forever," she said, and the world exploded into color. The throne shattered. The desert rose in a storm of light and sound. The sky itself peeled back to reveal a storm of faces and songs. All those who had come before, all those who would come after, all caught in the endless cycle of beauty and horror that was his domain. And in the middle of it, I stood, small, trembling but unbroken, not free, not saved, but aware. The last thing I remember before everything dissolved was a whisper, not mocking this time, but almost fond. "You will make a beautiful echo." And then there was light. Endless, devouring light. When the light faded, I found myself lying on cold stone. The hum was gone. The silence was gone. Only the faint rattle of breath filled my ears. The air tasted of metal and dust, the scent of the manufactorum ruins above ground. I had returned, or perhaps I had simply been discarded. I pushed myself up slowly, every joint trembling as if I'd been asleep for centuries. My hands left faint impressions on the floor, dust disturbed by something mortal once more. I blinked, and the dull glow of a broken lumen flickered to life nearby, casting its tired light across the walls. I was in the same alley where it had all begun. The same rusted pipes, the same broken prayer etched into the wall. Only the graffiti had changed. New shapes, new heresies written in colors that shouldn't exist. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream. A fever. A hallucination born of warp-tainted air and sleepless nights. But then I saw my reflection in a shard of glass lying nearby. My eyes, they were still ringed with gold. My pupils shimmered faintly with pink and violet when the lumen flared. The mark was subtle, but it was there. The gift of a god who does not forget his playthings. I laughed. A quiet, broken sound. The kind of laugh you give when you realize you've survived something you shouldn't have, and that surviving might not be the victory you hoped for. The city was waking. Or maybe it never slept. The streets outside the manufactorum tunnels were already alive with sound. The low, rhythmic chant of morning devotions to the Dark Prince. The mechanical whir of corrupted servitors distributing doses of stim candy and incense to keep the masses docile. I slipped out into the crowd, head low, goggles on. The faces I passed were empty and radiant all at once. Eyes glazed with bliss or despair, it was impossible to tell which. Vendors peddled experiences in bottles. Sounds, colors, touches, emotions stolen from other souls. A preacher in violet robes screamed praise through a vox grill that distorted his voice into a shriek of static. Children danced around him, their laughter perfectly in tune with his madness. Everywhere I looked, the same pattern unfolded. Beauty twisted into cruelty, joy devouring itself, desire looping endlessly back into hunger. It was horrifying. It was magnificent. It was Slanesh's perfection, and I walked through it. A single flicker of doubt in a city that no longer knew what doubt was. A woman brushed past me, and for a heartbeat I thought I recognized her. The same dancer from the carnival, the same eyes that once begged me to let go, but she didn't stop. She vanished into the crowd like a ripple fading on the surface of a lake. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was just the echo she left behind. I wandered for hours, maybe days. Time didn't work right anymore. Every street turned into another. Every sound echoed something I'd already heard. Yet beneath all of it, a strange calm had settled in me. Not peace and never peace, but clarity. I understood now what Slanesh truly was. Not just a god of pleasure or pain, but of transformation, of becoming, of stripping away every illusion until only truth remained, and then twisting that truth until you could no longer tell whether you loved it or hated it. And perhaps that's why the Dark Prince is feared most of all. Because unlike Khorne's rage or Nurgle's decay or Tzeentch's schemes, Slanesh doesn't demand your death. He offers you what you already wanted, and then asks if you can bear the cost of receiving it. As I reached the edge of the lower city, the dawn broke, a false dawn painted by toxic clouds and the reflection of burning spires. The light shimmered across the ruins like melted glass. For the first time, I didn't look away. Somewhere deep inside, I could still hear the whisper from the throne of echoes. You will make a beautiful echo. Maybe I already was one. Maybe we all were, the entire galaxy, each voice reverberating in that endless song of want and loss and memory. But I wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. I turned away from the rising light and began to walk. The sound of my boots against the cracked stone echoed softly behind me. A small sound, a human sound. In this world of gods and monsters, maybe that's the last defiance left to us. To remain ourselves long enough to hear our own echo before it's swallowed by theirs. And so I walked on, whispering a prayer that wasn't quite to the Emperor, and wasn't quite to anyone at all. Just to the silence. Just to remember what it used to sound like.